My daughter Sophie slept in my lap, marshmallow drying in her hair. The campfire had burned to embers. My phone buzzed. Text from my wife Jenna. I called the police. Told them you hit me. You can't come home. I read it twice. Looked down at Sophie's face. I know, I said. Then I opened the security camera app. There she was, in my shop, staging every bruise on camera. Quick moment, hit subscribe and drop your city in the comments. I love knowing where you're all tuning in from. My name is Caleb Morrow. I'm 43 years old and I build things for a living. Custom metalwork, railings, gates, architectural pieces for commercial clients across Central Ohio. I run a shop called Morrow Ironworks out of a converted warehouse on the east side of Columbus. Before that phone lit up at the campfire, I had a good life. I built it myself, every piece of it. My father, Earl Morrow, was a union welder at a structural steel plant in Zanesville. 31 years at that shop, never missed a day he wasn't scheduled off. When I was 14, he started bringing me in on Saturdays. Not because I asked, because he watched me take apart the lawnmower engine and put it back together without leftover parts. Hold the puddle steady, he'd say, standing behind me at the practice table. Don't chase it. Let the metal tell you where it wants to go. I burned through 100 pounds of filler rod that first summer. Ruined more practice plates than I could count. But by September, my beads were running clean, and my father nodded at one of them without saying anything. That was the highest compliment he knew how to give. I worked at the plant through high school and after. Learned MIG, TIG, stick, flux core. Passed my 6G pipe certification at 22. By 25, I was running jobs my father's foreman wouldn't touch. Stainless food grade work for a dairy processor, a 100-foot ornamental railing for a bank lobby downtown. The foreman didn't like that. Neither did some of the older guys. My father pulled me aside one evening after shift. We were in his garage, him cleaning his hood, me coiling an extension cord. You're not going to fit here much longer, he said. I fit fine. No, you build things your own way. This shop wants them built their way. He set the hood on the workbench. There's going to come a point where those two things can't share the same roof. So, what do? You find your own roof. He was right. I struck out on my own at 28. Rented a single bay in an industrial park, 1,200 square feet, a concrete floor with cracks you could lose a quarter in, and a roll-up door that stuck halfway unless you kicked the bottom left corner. First month's rent came from savings. Second month came from a restaurant owner in the short north who saw my portfolio photos and hired me to fabricate a custom stair railing. How long, he asked. 6 weeks. I need it in 4. Then it'll cost you for 4. He shook my hand. I delivered in 3.5. Word spread the way it does in trades. One architect told another. A contractor brought me onto a hotel renovation. Within 3 years, Morrow Ironworks had outgrown the single bay, and I moved into a 3,200 square foot warehouse 2 blocks north. Main fabrication bay with MIG and TIG stations. A coal forge I set up for decorative blacksmithing. Hand-forged scrollwork, custom hardware, things machines couldn't replicate. A client corner with a battered metal desk and a portfolio binder. Everything had a place. Everything was labeled. That's the part people joke about. I own a Brother P-Touch label maker, and I use it on everything. Every drawer in the tool chest. Every shelf in the supply room. Every cable behind the NAS drive. Every toggle on the breaker panel. My daughter Sophie started calling me Label Dad when she was 5. Daddy, why does the peanut butter jar say peanut butter? She asked once, standing on a step stool in the kitchen. So nobody puts it back in the wrong spot. But it's peanut butter. You can see it's peanut butter. Now you can see it and read it. She thought about that for 3 seconds. You're weird, Daddy. Noted. I married Jenna in 2014. We met at a friend's wedding in Columbus. She was working pharmaceutical sales, sharp and quick with conversation, the kind of woman who made a room feel organized just by standing in it. She asked about the shop, not the polite version most people asked. She wanted to know what I built, how I built it, whether the sparks burned. "You make things," she said on our third date, watching me forge a set of wall hooks at the shop. "Real things. I've never dated someone who makes things." She came to the shop on weekends, brought lunch, sat in the consultation corner reading while I worked. When I talked about buying a house that needed renovation, she didn't flinch. "Show me," she said. I showed her. The Craftsman bungalow sat on a tree-lined street in Clintonville, 1,400 square feet, original hardwood floors under carpet, knob and tube wiring, galvanized plumbing, 3 years from catastrophic failure. Asking price, $140,000, $20,000 under market because nobody wanted to deal with the work. Jenna stood in the kitchen doorway, looking at the cracked plaster ceiling and the gaps where baseboard had pulled from the wall. "It's a wreck. It's a project. There's a difference?" "About 3 years." She shook her head, but she was smiling. 3 years. But I picked the paint colors. Deal. I spent those 3 years on that house. Rewired every circuit myself. Pulled permits. Passed inspections. Replaced all the galvanized pipe with PEX and copper. Refinished the original oak floors on my knees over a long weekend. Added a primary bathroom where the old linen closet was, tiling the shower floor with penny-round mosaic laid one piece at a time. The porch took 6 months. I tore off the rotted decking, poured new footings, framed the wraparound extension with pressure-treated lumber, and built custom iron railings for my shop, scrollwork balusters with a hammered top rail that caught the light at sunset. Neighbors walking by stopped to watch me weld. A few asked what it would cost for their places. I tracked every hour in a spreadsheet, 2,847 across 3 years. The home appraised at $420,000 when the work was done. Almost all of that gain came from my hands. Jenna held pieces steady while I tacked the railings into place. She picked the paint. She hung curtains. Sophie was born in 2017. 7 pounds, 4 ounces, a full head of dark hair, and a grip on my index finger I can still feel if I close my hand. I coached her softball team when she was 6, the Clintonville Cougars, 12 girls who couldn't throw straight but showed up every Saturday in matching purple jerseys. I volunteered welding for the school fundraiser, building a decorative archway for the spring carnival entrance that the PTA reused 3 years running. The art teacher stopped me in the parking lot after the install. "Mr. Morrow, you donated 40 hours of labor for that archway. Sounds about right." "Why?" "Because my kid walks under it every morning." She didn't have a follow-up for that. For Sophie's 7th birthday, I spent 2 weeks at the coal forge. Drew the pattern on brown paper first, a butterfly with open wings. Cut the steel from flat bar with aviation snips, heated each wing in the coals until it glowed orange, shaped the curves over the horn of the anvil with a ball-peen hammer. Added texture with a cross peen, tiny overlapping marks that caught light and shadow. Brushed on a clear coat to keep the rust off. Sophie held it in both hands, turning it over. "You made this?" "From a piece of flat bar." "It's so light." She looked up. "Butterflies are light, and this is light." I hammered it thin. She set it on her nightstand that night, next to her reading lamp and her Girl Scout pin. Still there. That same year, tools started disappearing from the shop. Nothing expensive at first. A set of channel locks, a tape measure, a welding helmet lens I'd just replaced. Then a $100 angle grinder walked off the bench overnight. I checked the roll-up door. Locked. No forced entry. Could have been a client's subcontractor, a delivery driver, anyone with temporary access during business hours. I didn't suspect Jenna. Didn't suspect anyone in particular. I just wanted to know. So I wired the place myself. 4 Reolink PoE cameras, 2 wide-angle covering the main floor and workbenches, 1 on the tool crib along the back wall, 1 on the roll-up door. Ran cap ticks through the overhead steel rafters into a locked utility closet where I mounted a Synology DS220 Plus on a shelf bracket I'd welded. 2 mirrored 4 terabyte drives, continuous recording, motion-triggered capture, configured remote access so I could check feeds from my phone. The cameras were small and dark, mounted at ceiling height where they disappeared against the industrial steel. I labeled each one, camera 1 through camera 4, with the P-Touch. Labeled the NAS drive bays. Labeled the power supply cable. Labeled the Ethernet switch. Sophie saw the label maker on my bench the next time she visited. Did you label the cameras, Daddy? Of course. Did you label the labels? Don't give me ideas. I never found out who took the tools. The thefts stopped after I changed the lock on the roll-up door. The cameras kept recording anyway because that's how I built things. Once a system was in place, I left it running. 90 days of rolling footage, backed up every night, time-stamped against an NTP server for accuracy. A tinkerer's project. A practical fix for a minor problem. The shop, the home, the porch where neighbors stopped to talk, the iron butterfly on my daughter's nightstand. What I didn't know was that my wife had stopped seeing a home. I'd learn later what she saw. A listing, the appraisal number, the neighborhood comps, the custom ironwork that agents call premium features, $300,000 of equity sitting in walls I'd rewired and floors I'd sanded on my knees. I was labeling shelves. She was counting dollar signs. The furniture started moving in January. I came home from the shop on a Tuesday, and the living room couch had rotated 90 degrees. The coffee table I'd built from reclaimed barnwood sat at a new angle. The bookshelf had been cleared of family photos and replaced with 3 white ceramic vases I'd never seen before. Rearranging, Jenna said from the kitchen doorway. It photographs better this way. Photographs better for what? Instagram. The home account. She'd started a home decor Instagram 6 weeks earlier. 200 followers, most of them other women with the same neutral-toned feeds. I didn't think much of it. People had hobbies. But the rearranging didn't stop. Every 2 or 3 weeks, I'd come home to find another room altered. The kitchen table pushed against the window for natural light. Sophie's toys cleared from the hallway. My welding magazines removed from the bathroom rack. Each room stripped down, depersonalized, staged like nobody lived there. The house looks like nobody's allowed to sit down, I told her one Saturday morning, standing in the living room. Where did the family pictures go? Guest room closet. They cluttered the wall. Our wedding photo cluttered the wall? The frame was dated, Caleb, I'll get a new one. She never did. The renovation show started around the same time. HGTV on every evening, sometimes 2 or 3 episodes back to back. Jenna, on the couch with her phone, scrolling Zillow listings while couples on screen argued about open floor plans and granite countertops. She picked up new vocabulary, staging, comps, equity position, words she'd never used in 12 years of marriage. Do you know what we're sitting on? She asked one night during a commercial. I was reading Sophie's permission slip for a field trip. A couch. She didn't laugh. The television was still on, but she'd stopped watching it. I'm serious. This house. The renovation you did. What do you think it's worth now? I don't think about it. You should. Our equity in this place is probably $250,000, maybe more with the ironwork. That's real money, Caleb. It's a house. We live in it. She turned back to the television. Her jaw tightened. She didn't bring it up again that week, but the word equity stayed in rotation. Our equity, what we're sitting on, what this neighborhood is doing, like the house, was a stock ticker, and she was watching the price climb. I'd come home smelling like grinding dust and flux, and she'd wrinkle her nose and ask if I'd showered at the shop. I hadn't, because I'd been finishing a rush job. That used to be fine. Now, it wasn't. The dinner party at the Hendersons made it plain. Kevin and Laura Henderson lived 3 streets over. Kevin ran a software company. Laura taught yoga. Their kitchen had been in a magazine. Jenna loved going. I went because she asked. We were standing in their backyard, drinks in hand, 6 couples and a fire pit. Smoke drifted sideways in the November air. Kevin asked about a railing project I'd done for a law firm downtown. Custom scroll work, right? I drove past it last week. That's yours? Yeah. Took about 3 months. That's great work, man. Jenna cut in before I could respond. He comes home covered in metal shavings every night. I had to buy a separate hamper for his work clothes because the dust gets into everything. She laughed. The other wives laughed with her. I keep telling him there are people who can do the dirty work so he can focus on running the business. But he insists on being in the shop every day. I like being in the shop, I said. I know you do, honey. She put her hand on my arm. Her nails pressed into my forearm. That's the problem. Laura changed the subject. Kevin caught my eye across the fire and gave me a look that said, sorry. It got worse. Small cuts, regular frequency. She'd roll her eyes when I mentioned a new project at the shop. She stopped asking what I was building. When I gave a set of hand-forged bottle openers to our neighbors as Christmas gifts, 12 hours of forge work, each one different, Jenna pulled me aside in the kitchen afterward. You spent 2 weekends making garage sale trinkets for people who put them in a drawer. They're hand-forged. Each one's different. That's my point. You spent 60 hours making bottle openers when you could have been doing a paid commission. It's Christmas. It's a business, Caleb. Or it's supposed to be. She walked out of the kitchen. I stood there holding the last wrapped bottle opener, the one for Sophie's art teacher, and set it on the counter. Around this time, the therapy language appeared. Not from actual therapy. I'd sat through 3 sessions of couples counseling with her 2 years earlier. The therapist suggested Jenna examine her spending patterns. She quit after that 3rd session, but she'd kept the vocabulary. I feel unsafe when you raise your voice, she said one evening after I'd called Sophie in from the yard. I hadn't raised my voice. I projected it, the way you do when your kid is 50 feet away and dinner's getting cold. I need you to respect my boundaries around the kitchen renovation conversation, she said, when I asked why she'd gotten 3 quotes for new cabinets without mentioning it. I need space to process became her exit line from any disagreement. She'd say it with a specific cadence, even rehearsed, like she'd practiced the phrasing in front of a mirror. The words weren't communication. They were a shield. Say the right phrase, and the conversation ends. Challenge it, and you're the one who doesn't respect boundaries. I let it go. Every time I let it go. Then Barb started showing up. Barb Linden, Jenna's older sister by 4 years, lived in a townhouse in Reynoldsburg. Loud voice, hard opinions. She filled a doorframe like she was daring you to walk through it. She and Jenna had been close since childhood. Their mother taught them both the same trick. Say your version first, say it loudest, and never let anyone check the facts. But their bond had a quality I'd noticed since the wedding. Barb backed Jenna's version of events, whatever that version happened to be, and Jenna returned the favor. A closed loop. No outside input welcome. Barb had visited maybe once a month for the first 10 years of our marriage. Now she was driving over every week, sometimes twice. She'd arrive while I was at the shop and leave before I got home. When I was home, they'd sit in the bedroom or the kitchen with the door pulled shut. Low voices, the kind that went silent when I walked past. What were you two talking about? I asked once after Barb's car pulled out of the driveway. Sister stuff. You've been having a lot of sister stuff lately. She's going through something, Caleb. I'm not going to get into it. I didn't push. Barb's personal life was always a mess of its own. I figured Jenna was telling the truth. I was wrong. What I didn't know, what I'd learned months later from timestamps and subpoenaed emails, was that Jenna had met a man named Trent Daly at an open house in Upper Arlington 18 months before the filing. Trent was a real estate agent, 36 years old, bleached teeth and a leased BMW 5 Series. He worked for a mid-sized Columbus brokerage and specialized in residential flips. He had a talent for identifying undervalued properties and the women married to the men who'd improve them. The affair started within weeks of that open house. What Trent brought to the arrangement wasn't charm, it was a comparative market analysis. He ran comps on our home that spring, pulled recent sales of similar craftsman renovations in Clintonville, adjusted for square footage and lot size, and produced a formal CMA report that highlighted my custom ironwork, the refinished hardwoods, and the added bathroom as features commanding top market pricing. The CMA valued the home at $435,000. He emailed the report to Jenna 4 months before the restraining order. The subject line read, "Your next chapter." Jenna forwarded it to Barb the same afternoon with one line, "Start getting ready." 2 weeks later, Barb drove to Cincinnati and walked into a theatrical supply store on Vine Street. She purchased a professional Ben Nye bruise wheel palette, rigid collodion for skin texture, setting spray, and a compact mirror. Paid cash. The store's receipt, which would surface during discovery, was dated 3 weeks before the first alleged abuse incident in Jenna's timeline. The bruise kit went into a cosmetics bag. The cosmetics bag went into Barb's car. I'd stopped checking the shop cameras months earlier. The tool thefts had ended, and I had no reason to watch empty footage of a locked building. But the NAS kept recording. I'd find it all during discovery. Barb on camera too, walking the main floor, studying the layout, picking her angles. I noticed the distance, the short answers, the bedroom door closed when I came home, the way Jenna looked at me across the dinner table like she was running numbers behind her eyes. I told myself it was stress. Barb's problems, the weight of Sophie's school schedule, marriage has seasons, and some run colder than others. Every evening I came home, kissed Sophie, asked Jenna about her day, and got 2-word answers. Every weekend I went to the shop, built things for clients, came back smelling like work. Every night I lay in the dark next to a woman who was planning to destroy me. The cameras were already recording, and every piece of what she needed was passing through the one room in my life where I'd wired 4 cameras to the ceiling and labeled each one with a P-touch. Camp Tallawah sat 2 hours southeast of Columbus in the Hocking Hills, tucked between hemlock ravines and sandstone cliffs worn smooth by 10,000 years of water. Girl Scout Troop 4117 had booked 6 platform tents along a ridge trail, each one raised on treated lumber decking with canvas walls and a view of nothing but trees. I drove Sophie down on a Friday afternoon. Her camping gear filled the truck bed. Sleeping bag, mess kit, the headlamp she insisted on wearing for the entire drive even though it was daylight. She pressed her face to the window as we turned off the county road onto the gravel access. "Are there bears?" "Black bears. Small ones. They're more scared of you." "I'm not scary. You haven't seen yourself with that headlamp on." We set up our tent on the 3rd platform from the trail junction. I showed Sophie how to stake the rainfly with the lines angled away from the walls. Proper tension, no sag. She hammered 3 stakes before handing me the mallet. My arms tired. 3 stakes. They were hard stakes. I finished the rest while she arranged her sleeping bag and lined up her books along the platform edge. The other families trickled in through the afternoon, 12 girls, 9 parents, 2 troop leaders. Minivans and subs backing onto the grass lot, coolers being hauled up the trail, fathers helping daughters with tent poles, while mothers organized the food station under the dining pavilion. Karen Whitfield, the troop leader, walked the line checking setups. She stopped at ours and tugged the rainfly. "Caleb, this is the tightest pitch on the ridge. Labeled Dad does not allow sag," Sophie said from inside the tent. Karen laughed. I shrugged. That first evening, I helped 3 other fathers get their propane stoves lit and showed one of the girls how to tie a taut line hitch for her clothesline. We ate hot dogs and corn on the cob at the pavilion picnic tables. Sophie sat between 2 friends, ketchup on her chin, talking about a book where a girl trains a dragon. After dinner, the girls did a nature walk with the troop leaders. I stayed behind and split kindling for the communal fire ring. Mark Oster, a dad I knew from school pickups, stacked wood beside me. Jenna didn't come, he asked. Not her thing. He nodded. That was the whole conversation. The fire that night burned hot and clean. 12 girls in camp chairs, flashlights under their chins telling ghost stories. Sophie leaned against my leg, her marshmallow stick drooping as her eyes got heavy. I pulled the stick from her hand before it hit the coals. Time for bed, Soph. 5 more minutes. You said that 10 minutes ago. 5 more after that. I carried her to our tent, boots and all. Unzipped her sleeping bag, slid her in, pulled off her boots one at a time. She was asleep before I got the second one off. Saturday was a full day. Morning hike to the waterfall overlook, Sophie scrambling over roots and sandstone ledges while I spotted her from below. Afternoon craft session. Evening cookout. More marshmallows. 12 parents watched me that weekend. They saw me carry Sophie when her legs gave out on the trail. Saw me cut her food, tie her shoes, put her to bed. Saw me help their kids, too, steadying a girl on a creek crossing, retying a tent guy line at 2 in the morning when wind picked up, lending my headlamp to a father who'd forgotten his. None of them would forget it. The second night, the fire had burned low. Embers pulsed orange in the ring. Most families had turned in. 3 parents remained in camp chairs, talking in low voices about nothing. School schedules, a pothole on the county road, whether the rain would hold off. Sophie slept in my lap, marshmallow drying in her hair, her fingers curled around the zipper pull of my jacket. My phone buzzed. Text from Jenna. I called the police. Told them you hit me. You can't come home. I read it twice, looked down at Sophie's face. Headlights swept across the tree line. A Franklin County Sheriff's cruiser rolled up the gravel access road and stopped at the lot. The engine cut. A door opened. Footsteps on gravel, then dirt, then the soft crunch of leaves on the trail. The remaining parents looked up. The flashlight beam found our circle. The deputy, his nameplate read Morales, was young, late 20s, clean-shaven, the stiff posture of someone 2 years out of the academy. He carried a manila envelope in his left hand. His right hand stayed at his side, away from his belt. He scanned the fire ring, the sleeping child, the watching parents. His jaw tightened. "Mr. Morrow," he said. "That's me." He looked at Sophie, looked at the other parents, looked back at me. "Sir, I have an emergency protective order issued by Franklin County Family Court." He held out the envelope. "I'm required to serve you in person." The 3 parents went silent. Mark Oster's wife put her hand over her mouth. I took the envelope with my free hand, the one that wasn't holding my daughter. The paper was worn from his grip. I set it on my knee and opened the flap. "Sir, would you like to step away to read that?" Morales asked. "She's asleep," I said. "I'm not moving her." He nodded and stood 3 feet back, hands clasped in front of him, while I pulled the documents into the firelight. I read the first page by the glow of the embers. When that wasn't enough, I switched on Sophie's headlamp, the one she'd left on the arm of my camp chair, and held it against the paper. Jenna's sworn affidavit was 4 pages long, single-spaced, filed that afternoon. It alleged that I had grabbed her by both arms with enough force to leave bruises on 4 separate occasions between October and November, that I had shoved her into the hallway wall hard enough to crack the drywall, that I had stood over her in the kitchen holding a welding hammer and told her I could make it look like an accident. Every date was specific. October 3rd, October 19th, November 7th, November 14th. Behind the affidavit was a supplementary statement, notarized, from Barb Linden, described in the filing as Jenna's sister and a direct witness. Barb's statement claimed she had been present at the Morrow residence on October 19th and November 14th, that she had personally observed bruising on Jenna's upper arms consistent with being grabbed, that Jenna had confided in her about the wall incident and the welding hammer threat, and that Barb feared for her sister's physical safety. The EPO was the last page. Emergency Protective Order, Franklin County, State of Ohio. Respondent Caleb Morrow is ordered to vacate the marital residence. Prohibited from contact with petitioner Jenna Morrow by any means. prohibited from coming within 500 feet of the residence, temporary custody of the minor child to be transferred to the petitioner by noon the following day, full hearing scheduled within 10 court days. I read every word, then I read them again. Sophie shifted in my lap. Her fingers tightened on my jacket zipper, then relaxed. Still asleep. I folded the papers back into the envelope and looked up at Morales. "I understand," I said. The hand holding his notebook dropped to his side. "Sir, you're required to vacate the family residence. Do you have somewhere you can stay tonight?" "I'm at a campsite. I'll stay here tonight and leave in the morning." "And the child?" "I'll have her at the residence by noon, as the order says." He wrote something in a small notebook. His hand was shaking. "Not mine. Mr. Morrow, I want you to know, I'm just the messenger here." I nodded. He tore a carbon copy from his pad, handed it to me, and walked back up the trail. His flashlight beam swung through the hemlocks and disappeared. The cruiser started. Headlights swept the trees again, then pulled away. The three parents stared at me. Nobody spoke. Mark Oster's wife had tears running down her face. Mark himself sat with his elbows on his knees, looking at the ground. I shifted Sophie to a more comfortable position against my chest, picked up her marshmallow stick from the dirt, set it on the arm of the chair next to the headlamp. I opened the security camera app on my phone. The NAS was still recording. 90 days of rolling footage I hadn't checked in months. There she was. Camera 2, in my shop, sitting at my workbench under the fluorescent lights. A compact mirror propped against the vise. Barb standing behind her, holding a palette and a small brush. Jenna tilted her chin, and Barb leaned in, dabbing color onto her upper arm with short, careful strokes, staging every bruise on camera. I closed the app, looked down at Sophie's face. "I know," I said. The fire popped once and went quiet. I stayed in that chair until the embers died. Sophie slept through all of it. At 6 in the morning, I packed our gear. Sophie helped roll her sleeping bag, still half asleep, not asking questions because she didn't know there were questions to ask. We drove back to Columbus in near silence. She watched the hills flatten into farmland, the headlamp back on her forehead. I pulled onto our street at 11:45, parked a dozen houses down. 500 feet is roughly 170 yards. I measured it by the lot widths, 40-foot frontages, a dozen lots plus the gaps, close enough to see the porch, far enough to comply. Sophie unbuckled and looked at me. "Aren't you coming home?" "Not today, Soph. I've got to take care of some things at the shop." "Can I come?" "Not this time." She hugged me across the center console. Her arms barely reached around my neck. I held her, then I let go. I walked her to the sidewalk. Up the street, Jenna stood on the porch I'd built, arms crossed. She didn't come down the steps. I watched my daughter walk up the street, up the steps of the house I'd rebuilt with my own hands, and disappear through the front door. Jenna followed her inside without looking down the block. The door closed. I drove north on 71 for 40 minutes to Westerville. My older brother Darren lived in a 2-bedroom apartment off State Street, a place he'd landed after his own divorce 3 years ago. Pipe fitter for the plumbers union, broad shoulders, minimal conversation, the kind of man who said what needed saying and nothing else. He opened the door, looked at my face, looked at the camping gear piled in my arms. "Spare room's open," he said. The spare room had a futon, a folding table, and a window facing the parking lot. No decoration, no pictures on the walls. A single overhead bulb with a pull chain. 3 years ago, I'd helped Darren move into this place. Felt sorry for him then. I set my bag on the futon and sat at the folding table. Pulled the manila envelope from my jacket. Spread the affidavit flat under the light. October 3rd. At the shop until 9, finishing a rush order for a hotel lobby railing. Camera footage would show it. October 19th. Sophie's fall softball tournament in Dublin. 12 parents and a scorekeeper saw me coaching third base from noon to 5. November 7th. Zanesville. Visiting my father's grave with Darren. November 14th, the date on camera 2. The date Jenna sat at my workbench with a bruise kit and a compact mirror. Every date, every claim, every word. Darren stood in the doorway. He'd read the room. How bad? I looked at him. My voice came out flat and low, the way it gets when everything non-essential burns away and all that's left is the metal underneath. Every word of this is a lie. Every single word. The school called on Monday. I'd signed up 3 months ago to help with Sophie's winter reading fair, folding tables, checkout station, the same volunteer work I'd done every semester since kindergarten. The front desk put me on hold for 4 minutes. A voice I didn't recognize came back on the line. Mr. Morrow, your volunteer participation has been suspended pending a family court matter. Advised by whom? I'm not able to share that. I hung up. 12 years of showing up, the carnival archway, the softball coaching, the equipment hauling for field trips, suspended by a phone call from Jenna's side of the story before I'd said a single word of my own. The texts came that first week, not people reaching out, people pulling back. Tom Garza, a father I'd known since Sophie's T-ball league, sent one line, "Hey man, probably best if we give things some space right now." Laura Henderson, whose husband Kevin had stood at their fire pit 2 weeks earlier admiring my scroll work, "We're thinking of you both." No invitation attached. No phone number offered. A sentence designed to look like support from a distance where support costs nothing. I stopped counting after the 5th message. Wednesday, I drove to the shop to check a client order. In the parking lot, Dan Kowalski, the HVAC contractor who'd rented the bay next to mine for 6 years, was loading his van. He saw me. I raised a hand. He turned, climbed into the driver's seat, and pulled away. I stood in the lot with my hand half up. Word travels fast in a neighborhood like Clintonville. What travels faster is the interpretation. My quiet had always been read a certain way, steady, patient, the kind of man who measures twice. Now, the same quality carried a different weight. A man accused of bruising his wife who doesn't shout, doesn't weep, doesn't plead his case in parking lots. A woman walking her dog crossed the street when she saw me coming out of the shop. Heard it from Jenna's side, I might have thought the same thing. That evening in Darren's kitchen, he set a plate of spaghetti in front of me. The refrigerator kicked on behind him, a low rattle that never quite stopped. His one dish. He'd cooked it 4 nights a week for 3 years in this apartment. "Eat," he said. "I'm driving over there tonight." He sat down across from me. "To the house?" 500 feet. "I'll stay on the sidewalk. I just need to see if Sophie's—" "No." He pointed his fork at me. "You show up within a block of that place right now, she calls the cops again. This time they don't hand you papers. They cuff you in front of whatever neighbor's watching. What you want Sophie hearing about from her friends at school." I stared at the plate. "You told me every word was a lie," Darren said. "Can you prove it?" "The cameras. You saw something on your phone at the campfire. A clip. Enough to know." Enough to know isn't enough for court. "Have you gone through all of it? Every camera, every date?" I hadn't. The campfire glimpse had been a phone screen, compressed and small. I'd caught the broad picture, the mirror, the palette, 2 figures working at the bench, but I hadn't done the real work. "Kitchen table," Darren said. "Laptop." Tonight, I connected to the NAS through Synology's Quick Connect. The drive bays, labeled Drive A and Drive B in strips of P-Touch tape I'd applied 2 years ago, showed green across the board, both healthy. 90 days of continuous recording, time-stamped against a network time server. I opened camera 2, November 14th, dragged the timeline to 20,047. Full resolution on a laptop screen changed everything. On the phone at the campfire, the details had blurred into shapes on a 3-inch display. Here, I saw everything. Jenna walked into frame from the left wearing a dark, long-sleeve shirt pushed above her elbows. She set a zippered cosmetics bag on the workbench, unzipped it, and removed a compact mirror, a palette of dark-colored makeup, and a small brush. She propped the mirror against the bench vise and angled her left forearm under the fluorescent overhead. She chose a shade, deep purple, the color of a contusion 3 days old, applied it to the inside of her forearm in short, overlapping strokes. Checked the mirror, added a second color, yellowish-green, around the edges and blended with her fingertip. Barb entered frame behind her, leaned over Jenna's shoulder, and studied the result. No audio. I'd wired the system for video only, but the gestures read clean. Barb pointed to a spot near Jenna's elbow. Jenna added more paint. Barb nodded. Jenna switched to the right arm. 11 minutes, start to finish. When she was done, Jenna held both arms up to the mirror and rotated them. Barb gave a thumbs up. Jenna reached into the bag and pulled out a can of setting spray. 3 short bursts on each arm. I scrolled back. November 12th. Camera 4. The roll-up door. Barb walked in at 19,023 carrying the cosmetics bag and a shopping bag from a store I couldn't identify on camera. She set both on the workbench, then walked the floor alone, stopping at the anvil, the ball-peen hammers, the welding equipment on the far wall. She stood at each spot for several seconds, studying the angles, choosing the backgrounds for photographs she hadn't taken yet. November 16th. Camera 1. Jenna returned with her arms already painted. This time she positioned herself at the anvil. Barb held a phone in landscape mode, directing Jenna to turn her forearms toward the light. Jenna rested one painted arm across the iron face, bruised skin against black metal, heavy hammers in the background, every element placed, every detail staged to suggest a workshop where violence happened. Barb took at least 20 photos. Jenna reviewed each on the phone screen, deleting some, keeping others. 2 days later, she filed the EPO. Every frame carried NTP synchronized timestamps, not phone metadata that could be disputed, not screenshots that could be doctored. Continuous, unbroken video on mirrored drives in a locked closet that no one but me had ever touched. Darren stood behind me. He'd watched the entire review over my shoulder without saying a word. "Now, you need someone who knows what to do with this," he said. He called a friend named Vic Petrosian that night, a plumber he'd worked union jobs with for 15 years. Vic's ex-wife had tried manufactured allegations during their split. Took him 2 years and 3 lawyers before he found the right one. Denise Okafor, Vic said on speakerphone. Office in Grandview. She handles this kind of case. The next afternoon, I sat across a desk from a woman who had spent 2 decades separating real claims from fabricated ones and hadn't lost her appetite for the work. Denise Okafor, family law attorney, 48 years old, tall, with close-cropped natural hair and reading glasses on a beaded chain around her neck. She wore a gray pantsuit. She didn't ask whether I was innocent. She didn't offer sympathy or small talk. "Show me what you have," she said. I opened the laptop and played camera 2, November 14th, start to finish. Denise watched without moving. When it ended, she took off her glasses. Again. I played it again. This time, she had me pause at 3 points. Barb entering frame, the application of the setting spray, the mirror check at the end. What else? I showed her November 12th and 16th. She wrote 3 dates on a legal pad and drew a hard line beneath them. Your wife's affidavit lists 4 incidents. Dates: October 3rd, 19th, November 7th, 14th. October 3rd, where were you? At the shop until 9. Rush order for a hotel railing. Camera footage will confirm. The 19th, Sophie's softball tournament in Dublin. I coached third base from noon to 5. 12 parents and a scorekeeper. November 7th, Zanesville. My father's grave, with my brother. Denise turned to her computer, typed for a minute, turned the screen toward me. My house, my porch. The iron railings I'd forged, photographed in morning light. Interior shots of rooms stripped of personality and staged for sale. MLS listing created by Trent Daly, licensed real estate agent. Internal creation date, November 10th. 8 days before she filed, I said. 8 days before she filed, her boyfriend already had your home listed. That's not a dispute between spouses. That's a business plan with a restraining order as the opening move. She opened another tab, Barb Lyndon's public Facebook page. A check-in at a restaurant in Cincinnati's Over-the-Rhine district, time-stamped November 14th, 7:31 p.m. A photo, Barb and two women at a table with cocktails, location data embedded in the image. Her sworn statement places her in Columbus on November 14th, Denise said, witnessing bruises on your wife. She was in my shop that evening, on camera, coaching the Bruises. And at 7:30 she was 107 miles south, posting about it. That's a 100-minute drive on a good day. She's on your camera 76 minutes later. Denise picked up her desk phone and dialed a 3-digit extension. Maya, I need a full archive tonight. Facebook and Instagram for Barbara Lyndon, Linden, Reynoldsburg, Ohio. Screenshots with metadata, timestamps, and location data. Everything public. Before she thinks to scrub it, she hung up and folded her hands on the desk. You brought me time-stamped video, contradictory sworn statements, and a real estate listing that predates the filing by 8 days. She set her glasses down. I don't say this often, but this is going to be ugly and direct. That night, Darren and I cleared his kitchen table. I exported the camera event logs and printed them on his inkjet. 1 page per camera, per date. Denise couriered over copies of the MLS listing and Barb's archived social media before 10 o'clock. Maya, her paralegal, pulled 47 posts from Barb's accounts before midnight. Check-ins, tagged photos, a geolocated Instagram story showing Barb at a Cincinnati Reds game on a date she'd sworn under oath she was in Columbus watching her sister cry. I laid it all out. Camera logs on the left, affidavit dates in the center, contradicting evidence on the right. Each claim paired with its disproof, lined up in rows. Darren stood at the end of the table, arms crossed, looking at the spread. That's a lot of paper for 2 women who thought they were smarter than 4 cameras and a label maker. I pulled my label maker from the duffel bag I still hadn't unpacked. Printed a strip, pressed it to the edge of the table. Evidence, Morrow v. Morrow. Darren shook his head. Label Dad. I sat down and started building the timeline. Franklin County Family Court occupied the 4th floor of the downtown Columbus courthouse. Fluorescent tubes buzzed behind plastic panels, throwing flat light across worn oak gallery benches and carpet that smelled of old wood polish and too many bodies. Judge Patricia Weymouth's courtroom. A veteran family court judge in her early 60s with steel gray hair pulled into a low bun and wire-rimmed glasses she adjusted once before calling the room to order. Her reputation preceded her. 0 tolerance for perjury. More criminal referrals from the bench than any other family court judge in the county. The gallery was nearly full. Jenna's side of the gallery held 12 people, friends from the neighborhood. Laura Henderson, 2 women from her home decor Instagram circle, a neighbor who'd brought casseroles the week I was served. They sat in street clothes with concerned faces, the coordinated support of people who'd heard one version of a story and believed it. Darren sat alone on my side, best flannel shirt, arms crossed. He looked like a man sitting in a chair, which is exactly what he was. The empty benches on either side of him said everything the room needed to know about what happens when a man gets accused and the word goes out. Denise had dressed me that morning. Button-down shirt, pressed, clean, dark jeans. Leather boots I'd polished at Darren's kitchen table. My hands sat flat on the respondent's table, fingers laced. I kept them there. Across the aisle, Jenna wore a structured blazer over a white blouse. Honey blonde hair at her shoulders, not a strand out of place. Chin up, back straight, ice blue eyes fixed on a point above the judge's bench. The bearing of a woman who believed her story would hold because it always had. Her attorney, a man named Caldwell in a navy suit, presented first. He stood at the lectern with Jenna's sworn affidavit and read the allegations into the record. 4 dates, 4 incidents, descriptions of grabbing, shoving, threats involving welding equipment, His voice carried the practiced weight of someone who believed his client, or at least billed as if he did. He introduced Barb's notarized statement as supporting testimony from a direct witness. Then, the photographs. The projection screen lit up. My workbench, my anvil, my ball-peen hammers in the background, and Jenna's forearms in the center of the frame, painted with dark contusions that looked real enough in a photograph if you'd never seen real bruises. Purple centers, yellowish-green edges. The setting spray had held. Caldwell let the image sit. These photographs were taken by the petitioner on the evening of November 16th in the respondent's metalworking shop. The location itself speaks to the environment of intimidation. Judge Weymouth wrote something on her pad. Her face gave nothing away. Barb took the witness stand next. She wore a dark dress and low heels, the most restrained outfit I'd ever seen her in. Caldwell walked her through the statement. She directed each answer to the gallery, not the judge. Full volume, chin level, the delivery of someone who'd rehearsed in front of a mirror until the words felt like memory. I was at the house on October 19th, Barb said. Jenna showed me the bruises on her upper arms. She was shaking. She asked me not to say anything because she was afraid of what Caleb would do. And November 14th, same thing. I came to visit and she had fresh marks. I told her she needed to go to the police. She was too scared. Her voice carried to the back wall, loud, certain, the voice of a woman who'd spent her whole life being believed because she spoke louder than anyone who might contradict her. Caldwell returned to his seat. He looked satisfied. Denise stood. Everything I'd built, the shop, the house, the iron butterfly on Sophie's nightstand, 12 years of showing up, came down to whatever happened next. She buttoned her jacket with one hand and walked to the center of the courtroom floor. No notes, no folder. She looked at Judge Weymouth. Your Honor, I would ask the court's indulgence for 60 seconds of video evidence that will directly contradict every material claim in the petitioner's sworn affidavit. Weymouth looked at Caldwell. Caldwell shrugged, a mistake he'd think about later. Proceed, the judge said. Maya, Denise's paralegal, tapped a laptop connected to the projection screen. The bruise photographs disappeared. In their place, a wide-angle feed of my shop's main fabrication bay. The timestamp in the lower right corner read NAV 14, 20,014,012. On screen, Jenna walked into frame from the left. She set a zippered cosmetics bag on the workbench, unzipped it, removed a compact mirror, a palette, and a small brush, propped the mirror against the bench vise, extended her left forearm under the fluorescent overhead, and began applying dark makeup to the inside of her arm in short, overlapping strokes. Barb entered frame behind her, leaned over Jenna's shoulder, pointed to a spot near the elbow. Jenna added more paint. Barb nodded. Jenna switched to the right arm. No audio. The footage didn't need it. The room stopped. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. A supporter on Jenna's side looked down at her hands. Judge Weymouth's pen stopped moving. Caldwell shifted an inch toward the edge of his chair. I kept my hands flat on the table. The footage ran 63 seconds. Denise let it play to the end. The mirror check, the setting spray, Barb's thumbs up. Exhibit B, Denise said. Maya switched feeds. Camera 4, the roll-up door. November 12, 1923, Barb walking into the shop carrying the cosmetics bag and a shopping bag. She set both on the workbench, then walked the floor alone, stopping at the anvil, the hammers, the welding equipment along the far wall, studying angles, choosing backgrounds for photographs she hadn't taken yet. 2 days before the staging in Exhibit A, Denise said. Ms. Linden arrived with the materials and surveyed the workshop for photographic positioning. Exhibit C, Camera 1, November 16th. Jenna at the anvil, forearms already painted. Barb behind her with a phone in landscape mode, directing Jenna to rotate her arms toward the light. The same photographs Caldwell had projected minutes earlier, now shown being manufactured, angle by angle, against the same tools arranged as backdrop for violence that never happened. 2 days before the EPO was filed, Denise said. The photographs entered into evidence by opposing counsel were staged in this sequence. She walked to the evidence table and held up a clear plastic sleeve containing a single receipt. This is a purchase receipt from a theatrical supply store in Cincinnati, Ohio. 1 Ben Nye Bruise Wheel palette. 1 bottle of rigid collodion for skin texture. 1 can of setting spray. Purchased with cash 3 weeks before the first alleged incident in the petitioner's timeline. She placed the receipt on the judge's bench. Then she turned to Barb. Ms. Linden, your sworn statement places you in Columbus, Ohio, on the evening of November 14th at the Morrow residence where you claim to have witnessed fresh bruising on your sister's arms. Barb sat straight in the witness chair. That's correct, is it? Denise nodded to Maya. The projection screen changed. A screenshot of Barb's Facebook page. A photograph of 3 women at a restaurant table, cocktails, bread basket, exposed brick behind them. Barb in the center, smiling wide. The geolocation tag read over the Rhine, Cincinnati, OH. The timestamp, November 14th, 7:31 p.m. This is your public Facebook post from that evening. Geotagged to a restaurant 107 miles from Columbus. Another screenshot replaced it. Barb's Instagram account. A check-in at the same restaurant, same evening. Your own Instagram account confirms the same location. Ms. Linden, Cincinnati is a 100-minute drive from Columbus on a clear night. Your appearance on the respondent's security camera begins at 8:47 p.m. that same evening. Can you explain how you witnessed Bruises in Columbus, posted from Cincinnati at 7:31, and arrived at the shop 76 minutes later? Barb's mouth opened, closed. Her eyes cut to Caldwell. Caldwell was writing something and did not look up. The dates might be, I visit often, and sometimes the dates might be confused. Denise repeated. Your sworn statement specifies November 14th. You signed it. You had it notarized. I was there on which other dates, Mrs. Linden? Because camera 2 recorded every visit you made to that shop. I have the complete log. Barb's hands locked around the witness stand railing, knuckles white. Her voice had thinned to half its volume, each word smaller than the last. A woman who'd rehearsed answers to questions that were never going to be asked. I need to speak to my one final exhibit, Your Honor. The projection screen changed. NMLS listing for a 3-bedroom craftsman bungalow in Clintonville, Ohio. Professional photographs of rooms I recognized. The living room with the ceramic vases that had replaced our family photos. The kitchen table pushed against the window for natural light. The wraparound porch with my iron railings catching morning sun. Listed by Trent Daly, licensed real estate agent, through his Columbus brokerage. Internal creation date, November 10th, 8 days before the emergency protective order was filed, Denise said. The petitioner's romantic partner had already created a listing for the family home, using photographs that matched the petitioner's social media staging shots. She placed the MLS printout on the judge's bench beside the receipt. This was not a domestic violence case. This was a real estate transaction with a restraining order as the opening move. Jenna's voice came from the petitioner's table, not through her attorney. High and rapid, the rehearsed cadence stripped away. That's not, Caleb has a temper, Your Honor. He's manipulating. The cameras were there to watch me, to control. Ms. Morrow, Judge Weymouth said one name, the voice of a woman who had heard enough. Jenna stopped. The judge looked at the projection screen, looked at the exhibits stacked on her bench, looked at Barb, still locked onto the witness stand railing with white knuckles. Then she reached up and removed her glasses. 3 of the supporters on Jenna's side were staring at the floor. Caldwell had set his pen down. Darren sat with his jaw tight, hands on his knees, pushing a long breath through his nose. Denise turned to Jenna. Her voice dropped, not quiet, not loud, just the calm of someone presenting a question that had no safe answer. Mrs. Morrow, can you explain to the court why you appear in your husband's workshop applying cosmetics to your forearms with a mirror and a bruise kit on the workbench beside you? The lights buzzed overhead. The ventilation pushed warm air through ceiling vents. 40 people waited. Jenna didn't answer. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. Her eyes went to Caldwell, to the gallery, to the projection screen still showing her own hands painting bruises onto her own forearms. She looked at everything in the room except me. Judge Weymouth waited. The clock on the back wall counted 10 seconds. Nobody filled them. Then the judge folded her hands on the bench. The court has reviewed the evidence presented today. The sworn affidavit of the petitioner contains material claims that are directly contradicted by time-stamped video evidence from the respondent's place of business. She turned to address the room. Her voice carried the weight of someone who had delivered rulings for 3 decades and had no interest in being gentle about this one. The emergency protective order filed on November 18th is vacated, effective upon my signature of this order. I kept my hands flat on the table, same position they'd held for the past hour. Full temporary custody of the minor child, Sophie Morrow, is granted to the respondent, Caleb Morrow. The court finds that the petitioner's willingness to fabricate evidence and submit false sworn statements constitutes a direct threat to the child's welfare. Across the aisle, Jenna gripped the edge of the petitioner's table. Her knuckles matched the white of her blouse. The court is referring both Jenna Morrow and Barbara Linden to the Franklin County Prosecutor's Office for criminal investigation under Ohio Revised Code Section 2921.11. Perjury, she paused. The room was still enough to hear the ventilation cycling through the ceiling. Perjury, in connection with a domestic violence proceeding, is a felony of the 3rd degree under Ohio law. It carries a potential sentence of up to 36 months of imprisonment. This referral is not made lightly. The evidence before this court shows a coordinated, premeditated effort to defraud these proceedings, and this court will not permit its protective orders to be used as instruments of theft. She signed the order. Pen on paper. The scratch filled the silence. I sat at the respondent's table. Same stillness, same expression. The same composure Jenna had described in her affidavit as something dark and dangerous beneath a quiet surface. She was wrong about what it was. She was wrong about everything. Denise collected her exhibits. I stood and shook her hand. She nodded once and closed her briefcase. Nothing more needed saying between us. Behind me, Darren dropped his head forward. He pressed both palms against his eyes, elbows on his knees. His shoulders shook once, just once. 3 years ago, he'd sat in a courtroom like this one and lost. Different judge, different evidence, same system. He'd watched his brother fed into the sane machine, and this time, it spit out the right answer. Jenna's supporters filed out through the gallery doors in 1s and 2s. Laura Henderson kept her eyes on the floor tiles. The Instagram friends walked close together, purses held tight against their ribs, talking to no one. The casserole neighbor, the woman who'd brought 3 meals to my house the week I was served, paused in the doorway, half turned toward Jenna's table, then thought better of it and left. None of them looked at me. None of them looked at Jenna. Caldwell leaned toward his client and spoke low enough that I caught none of it. Jenna shook her head. He spoke again. She stood, pulled her blazer straight with both hands. The fabric wrinkled now where she gripped the table edge and walked out of the courtroom without turning around. Her heels clicked fast on the tile corridor until the sound faded to nothing. Outside the courthouse, November air cut through my shirt. Darren walked beside me across the plaza toward the parking garage. "You all right?" he asked. "Yeah. You want to eat?" "I want to get my daughter." He nodded. That was the end of it. The consequences arrived in the order you'd expect if the system was paying attention for once. Trent Daly's real estate license was suspended within 2 weeks. The Ohio Division of Real Estate acted on a complaint from Denise's office. listing a property without the co-owner's knowledge or consent while maintaining a personal relationship with the other co-owner. His brokerage opened a separate ethics investigation 3 days after that. I heard his desk was cleared by month's end. The leased BMW went back to the dealer around the same time. Monthly payments looked different without commission checks. Jenna's attorney filed a motion to retain shared custody. Denied. A motion to remain in the residence pending final divorce proceedings. Denied. A motion to restrict access to the security footage. Denied. Each filing came back with the same judge's signature. Weymouth wasn't finished. The neighborhood turned in the span of 1 week, not because anyone read court filings, because people talk. The same network that had carried Jenna's version to every doorstep now carried the correction with twice the speed. I didn't say a word. The Camp Tallawah parents said it for me. Karen Whitfield, Sophie's troop leader, submitted a 2-page letter to the court. She described the camping weekend, the tents, the waterfall hike, the marshmallows, the 2 in the morning guideline repair. She wrote that I was one of the most involved and gentle fathers in our troop. 3 parents from the campfire that night, the one still sitting by the embers when Deputy Morales walked in, provided sworn statements confirming what they'd seen. A man served an emergency order while his daughter slept in his arms, who didn't raise his voice, didn't resist, didn't do anything except read the documents and comply. The same people who'd witnessed my worst moment became the strongest proof of my character. Commercial clients weighed in without being asked. The architect who'd hired me for the hotel railing wrote a reference letter. The restaurant owner from the short north called Denise's office and offered a deposition. 6 years of custom metalwork for contractors and developers across central Ohio, and not one of them hesitated when the question was whether Caleb Morrow was the kind of man described in that affidavit. Dan Kowalski, the HVAC contractor next door who turned his back on me in the parking lot, left a 6-pack outside my roll-up door with a note. 2 words. My bad. Barb and Jenna stopped speaking within a week of the ruling. Their attorneys ordered it. Separate criminal proceedings meant any contact between co-defendants could be weaponized against both. But the fracture ran deeper than legal strategy. Through Darren's union friend, Vic Petrosian, who knew someone in Barb's neighborhood, I heard the version Barb was selling. Jenna dragged me into this. I just went along. Jenna's version, relayed through Caldwell's office to Denise during settlement talks, ran the opposite direction. Barb planned it all. She bought the makeup. She positioned me. 2 women who'd spent their lives backing each other's stories, now telling opposite versions of the same lie. Tom Garza, who texted me to give things some space, called and left a voicemail I didn't return. Laura Henderson sent a card. I put it in a drawer unopened. The woman who'd crossed the street to avoid me outside my shop now crossed it to avoid Jenna's side of the block. Same sidewalk, same instinct, different target. Jenna's Instagram went dark. No staging shots, no renovation posts. No warm garage and ceramic vases arranged on surfaces where family photographs used to hang. The account that had cataloged every room of my house as a future listing sat untouched for the first time since she'd created it. The staging had lost its buyers. None of this was winning. It was a ledger balancing, every entry where it belonged. Jenna tried to take the house and lost her daughter instead. She fabricated Bruises in the one room I'd wired with 4 cameras and labeled with a P-touch. She controlled the story until the story turned and consumed her. The witnesses to my humiliation at Camp Tallawah became the witnesses to her collapse in court. The math was clean, and none of it erased the weeks I'd spent on Darren's futon, staring at a parking lot through a bare window, wondering if Sophie thought I'd left her. The custody transfer was scheduled for a Saturday morning at a supervised facility on East Broad Street, neutral site. The lobby smelled like floor cleaner and recycled air. A clerk from family court sat at a desk by the door with a clipboard and a court-issued form. Jenna brought Sophie at 10. She held Sophie's hand but didn't look across the lot. I stood in the parking lot beside my truck, hands in my jacket pockets, watching the glass doors. They opened. Sophie came out carrying her Girl Scout sash bunched in one hand, a backpack dragging from the other. She saw me across 30 feet of asphalt. She dropped both and ran. I caught her at full speed. Her arms locked around my neck. Her face pressed into my shoulder hard enough that I felt her jaw against my collarbone. She didn't cry. She held on. "I missed the shop," she said into my collar. "It missed you. Is my butterfly still there?" "At the house. On your nightstand, right where you left it." She pulled back and looked at me. Her mother's blonde hair, my hazel eyes. 8 years old, and the only reason any of this had mattered. "Can we go home?" "Yeah, Soph. We can go home." I drove the speed limit the whole way to Clintonville. Sophie sat in the back with the window cracked, watching the neighborhood pass at 30 miles an hour. I pulled into the driveway. The iron railings on the wraparound porch caught late morning light the same way they had the day I welded them. Hammered top rail, scrollwork balusters, every joint ground clean. Sophie ran up the steps, through the door, and down the hall. Her bedroom door opened. A pause. Then her voice from the back of the house. "It's here, Daddy. It's still here. The iron butterfly, on the nightstand, where it belonged." I stood on the porch I'd built and listened to my daughter inside the house I'd rebuilt with my own hands. The same house Jenna had photographed as a listing. The same rooms where Barb had whispered behind closed doors. The same walls Trent had priced at $435,000. All of that was gone now. What was left was the work. The floors I'd sanded, the circuits I'd wired, the railings I'd hammered, and behind the front door, the sound of Sophie pulling books from her shelf at home in the place that had always been hers. I went inside and closed the door. Loving this so far? Smash like and rate my story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Thank you for being here. 6 months later, I built Sophie a reading nook in the back corner of Morrow Ironworks. I started with reclaimed steel, angle iron from a demolished parking structure on the east side, cut to length on the bandsaw and welded into a frame that anchored to the shop's concrete floor. The walls I clad in salvaged barnwood from a dairy farm outside Granville that was tearing down its original hay barn. The boards were 80 years old. Gray on the outside, honey-colored underneath once I ran them through the planer. I sanded each one by hand and sealed them with tung oil. The bench seat I built from the same barnwood, with storage underneath for her backpack and books. I sewed the cushion cover myself, dark canvas, stuffed firm enough to sit on for hours. The reading lamp took a full weekend at the forge. I started with a salvaged gas pipe fitting 3/4-inch 90-degree elbow and hammered the base from flat bar into a weighted disc. The bulb threw warm amber light across the bench and the shelf above it. The shelf held 6 paperbacks, dog-eared, spine-cracked, read more than once, and beside them, the iron butterfly. Sophie placed it there herself on the first afternoon. She set it between a book about a girl who trains dragons and a field guide to Ohio wildflowers, then adjusted it twice until the wings caught the lamplight at the angle she wanted. Her Girl Scout badge sash hung from a wall hook near the nook's entrance. A hook I'd forged from a single piece of round stock, scrolled at the tip, mounted with a lag bolt into the barnwood frame, green fabric and gold badges hanging against gray steel. 23 badges. She was working on her 24th. After school, Sophie sat on the bench with her math workbook open and a pencil behind her ear. She kicked her feet against the storage compartment in the rhythm she used when she was concentrating. 2 slow, 1 fast, pause, repeat. Her lips moved when she counted. She didn't know I was watching. The shop smelled like tung oil and grinding dust. Above us both, camera 3 sat on its steel rafter mount. Small dark housing, green status light, Cat 6 cable running along the beam to the locked utility closet where the NAS hummed on its shelf bracket. The P-Touch label on the cable read Camera 3 Tool Crib in the same block letters I'd printed 2 years ago. Still recording. Same as always. I picked up the label maker from the workbench. Typed 6 letters and an apostrophe. The tape fed through with its small mechanical whir. The sound, Sophie once said, reminded her of a cricket clearing its throat. I cut the strip, peeled the backing, and pressed it to the barn wood frame above the entrance to the nook. Sophie's corner. She looked up from her workbook. You labeled my corner. Had to. Why? So nobody puts it back in the wrong spot. She went back to her math. The lamp caught the iron butterfly's wings. Camera 3 kept recording, and the only part of my world that ever mattered sat right there, safe, kicking her feet against the bench, counting under her breath.